Welcome to today's session. My name is Kevin Hancock, and I'll be the host today. Before we get started, I'm going to give 2 minutes for people who might be running a little late a chance to join up. So please just sit tight. We'll go ahead and start at 2 minutes after the hour. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. If you just joined us, I'm going to give 1 more minute for people who might be running a little late a chance to join. So please just hang tight with me, and we'll go ahead and start in 1 more minute at 2 minutes past the hour. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining today's session. Again, my name is Kevin Hancock, and I'll be your host today. For today's session, get help with your NIST 800-171 CMMC policies. So during today's session, David Rowe, my co-host, will be walking through how to work with Exostar's Policy Pro solution. If during this session you'd like to follow along as we do this, you can go ahead and sign up for the Policy Pro free trial. If you wanted to get an account, you can see the link in the YouTube description. It takes about 2 minutes. I'm going to be covering a front-end preamble, if you will, so you'll have that 2 minutes to sign up for that free trial if you'd like to. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to 1 hour. That does include question and answers. Those questions were submitted prior to today's session. When you signed up, you were given the opportunity to submit those, and those will be the ones we'll be covering today. I think we got 7 today. If for some reason there is an outage during the presentation, just wait for a minute, go ahead and refresh the page. You can also always click on that YouTube link that you received in your invite as well to get reconnected. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations that will be referenced during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and it'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That can be found on our website at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after the event. You can also replay the webinar anytime you'd like by using that YouTube link that you received in your email as well. If you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, if you want to get a copy of the slide deck, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. Also on the Exostar website, www.exostar.com, we do have a chat feature enabled on all the pages, so you can also talk with us over that function as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. And I'm hosted by, and I'm joined, not hosted by, but I'm joined by David Rowe of ISMS Solutions. David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. My name is David Rowe. I am the Business Development Manager here at ISMS. happy to share and show the platform and how it can help your organization get compliant around CMMC as well as NIST 800-171.
All right, thanks, David. So just want to give everyone a rulemaking update on CMMC, because that is often what people are looking to get compliant with. So CMMC, excuse me. So in the Federal Registry, right, that is the place where the different agencies submit their rulemaking, right, and that's to the General Services Administration. It's now appeared on the registry there that CMMC is planned for submission in September of 2023. Now, in this submission, it's going to be submitted as a notice of proposed rulemaking. What that means in layman's terms is then the CMMC rules will go through a public comment period. So organizations and individuals will have a chance to review and comment on this proposal that the Department of Defense is making. And the Department of Defense will then respond to those public comments over a period of time. What that means in practical terms is we won't see CMMC in 2023. And you may not even see it in 2024 because there's another step in there. Right? There's then another step in the rulemaking process. It goes into an interim final rule, and then it starts to show up in contracts. So stay tuned for additional updates, but we're pretty confident that CMMC won't appear in DFARS contracts here in 2023. Now, however, there have been some other things going on as they apply to contracts with the Department of Defense or Department of Defense contracts and their clauses that you agree to as a subcontractor to those who have signed DoD contracts. The latest one was DFARS 252.204-7024. What this rule directs contracting officers to do is that they now can consider that the supplier performance risk system, that's what the SPRS stands for, they can consider a supplier's score in that system as part of the contract award process. So, all things go into contract awards, right? The proposal submissions, pricing, but also the risk of that supplier is another one of those factors that contracting officers can consider. So what this means is, you need to be compliant with current rules and what those ask you to do to be more competitive in your contract bids. So to cover that, what do you need to make sure you've done today? So the first thing I would always remind people to do is take a look at your current contracts. Now, either these are contracts you have directly with the Department of Defense, or these are clauses that have been flowed down to you because you've signed contracts with a prime contractor and you're a subcontractor to that prime. The things you want to look for are those DFARS clauses, right? Those are the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations. And the clauses that either you've signed or have been flowed down to you as part of the requirements that primes have when they sign these contracts. And those clauses particularly to look for are the 252.204-7012, 7019, and 7020. These clauses require you as a contractor to comply with NIST 800-171 in order to protect controlled unclassified information. And the NIST 800-171 controls are those controls you need to have in place and be compliant with as part of the fulfillment of that contract. Now, if you've got the 7019 clause in there, what that requires you to do is do a self-assessment and score that self-assessment. And in order to score that self-assessment, that's where you use the NIST 800-171 alpha, right? That's the assessment guide. That tells you the points you award yourself if you've got a particular, if you've implemented one of those 110 controls, how you've implemented it, etc. And that gives you a numeric score that you then enter into that SPRS system and share that score with the Department of Defense. So if you've got that 7019 clause, that's what you should have done today. And as part of that process of scoring yourself, you should have created what's called an SSP, a system security plan. And as part of that SSP, you generate what's called a plan of action and milestones, a POAM, for any of those controls you haven't implemented. And that plan of actions and milestones is your process or your procedure to close that and then become compliant with that particular control. One of the questions we got in the questions that were submitted was about the relationship between CMMC and NIST 800-171. So that is a very tight relationship. So CMMC will also require an assessment, both a self-assessment of a contractor or a subcontractor to NIST 800-171 controls. The major difference between CMMC and the current rules is that with CMMC, that's going to be a third-party assessment. So you would contract with what's called a C3PAO. Sorry about that. I sometimes get tongue-tied over acronyms. And that's a certified third-party assessment organization. You would contract with them once every 3 years for them to do an independent assessment of how you're doing against those NIST 800-171 controls. So that's the, if you will, how these two things will be joined together. It'll still be making sure that you're compliant with those NIST 800-171 controls, but rather than just a self-assessment, it'll also be a third-party assessment every 3 years to ensure that compliance. But this compliance journey, if you will, always starts with those policies. And with NIST, you have 110 controls across 14 families. And that's really where Policy Pro comes in. This is a platform offered out as a service from Exostar that provides you those policy templates you need to be able to create those for your organization that are both, that meet the standards and that also address all the key elements that those assessors and the National Institute for Standards are actually looking for. Policy Pro allows you to leverage what you've already created. So if you've already got certain policies, you can utilize those with Policy Pro. But it also provides those templates for other policies that you need to create. It provides you a policy builder with references to help you customize those policies to both meet the controls as well as tailor them for your organization. It has an engine which allows you to take existing policies as well as these new policies that you've created, run those through and get them scored. And as offered out as a cloud service to ensure that as these things change, and they will, you're kept up to date on those changes. You get notified of those changes as they occur, and you can then adjust accordingly to make sure you remain compliant. So to show you how this all works, I'm going to turn it over now to David to show you how Policy Pro can help your organization maintain and update your policies and become compliant with the NIST 800-171 and the upcoming CMMC 2.0 requirements. David, over to you.
Kevin. All right, so as Kevin mentioned, today I'll be showing you and walking you through the platform Policy Pro. Regardless of where your organization is in terms of your cybersecurity journey, so whether you are just getting started out and you're unsure of even where to get started, or maybe your organization is further along and you have all of your policies in place, we believe that Policy Pro is a good tool and resource for all situations when it comes to policies. So Policy Pro has been updated for CMMC 2.0, the current version. Today we'll be walking through an example of a level 2 from CMMC 2.0, but again, the level 2 corresponds with all of the 110 practices and the 14 policies associated with the NIST 800-171. We'll begin with our policy building tool, and our policy builder tool is the first step in your journey. So if you're just getting started with NIST 800-171 compliance, to ensure that you're compliant around those DFARS clauses that Kevin mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that all of your policies are in place. And the free trial does include access to view all of these 14 different policies and to even be able to create and export your access control policy. So if you're looking for a quick and easy way in order to get your SPURS up quickly, SPURS score up quickly, then definitely come check out the free trial and start working on that access control policy. The first time through on the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, and it's a brief explanation of what are policies, as well as what are some of the other sorts of documents you'll need to have in order to be compliant. So, for example, you'll need to have things like a POAM, which is that plan of actions and milestone. If you don't already have one, we provide templates to all these documents as well. In addition to the POAM, we also include the SSP template. If you do want a more automated approach to these templates, as well as other features, there is a companion product called Certification Assistant that Kevin will talk about a little bit later in today's webinar. But again, for today's purposes, we'll focus primarily on policies. So we'll go ahead and close out of this pop-up here, and you'll come next to our Prepare, Gather, and Consult page. So this is everything you'll need to prepare, or your organization will need to prepare prior to even getting started with the policy itself. So it'll include things like gathering any sort of document, record, process, or procedure related to these various access control topics. They can include things like your document or records related to the maintenance of your company's IT infrastructure, personnel documents, certifications, etc. And additionally, it'll guide you into who you might need to speak to as part of this process, including people like your network administrator, head of IT, or CISO, and then any sort of outside contractor that you do utilize. So if you do utilize someone like an MSP, an MSSP, IT consultant, they would also be involved as part of the process of creating an access control policy. Once you have all of that prepared, you can then click on the Ready Get Started button, and that will take you to the actual access control template. All of our policy templates are broken out into a couple of different sections. We've got the header, which includes your organization name, the department the policy falls under, the issue date for when you finalize the policy, approved by, and the tracking number. The tracking number can be utilized to keep track of the version number of the policy. The other sections include the purpose, the scope, and then the individual practices. So, excuse me. This is where all of your, where the bulk of your work is going to be done is through these individual practices. Again, there's 110 practices spread out across the 14 policy domains. And each practice here is going to include the practice name, as well as some guidelines underneath that. And the guidelines will help you as you're crafting and rewriting the policies in order to ensure that you're covering everything you need to cover, as well as help guide you in terms of the narrative of your policy. So we'll walk through an example here together of Access Control 3.1.1, which is about limiting information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices. To open up that practice template, you'll click on the pencil icon located to the right-hand side, and that will bring up this pop-up here. So we can see that our 3.1.1 policy is going to be about our organization's account creation, work from home, and bring your own device policy. A couple notes as you're working through these policies. One, make sure to read through the entirety of the policy. You want to ensure that everything written here in the template reflects what your organization has implemented or what your organization plans to implement in the future. So definitely make sure to customize it based on exactly what it is your organization is doing. Additionally, there are going to be certain sections you want to pay particular attention to as you're customizing these policies. One example is here in the first paragraph where it says all account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the account request ticketing system or other process. So there in the brackets, whatever system it is you're utilizing for account creations, that's what you would fill in there, or maybe if you're not using a particular ticketing system, whatever other sort of process it is that you are utilizing. Another example might be here in the second bullet where it says systems administrators and members of the IT support team shall respond and act accordingly to requests within a timely fashion, offering at least a blank hour turnaround for account creation. So again, depending on how long it takes your organization to actually create that account, you'll fill in that blank there. Moving on, and also you can see here, once you've made those changes and saved it, you can see exactly which user and when they updated it. So if you do have multiple users working on policies, you can see exactly which practices have been worked on and which ones still need to be worked on. Once you've finished that process, we can then export that document by going here to lower right-hand corner, click that export button, and it's going to combine all of the sections I mentioned before. So the header, the purpose, the scope, and all of the individual practices. Additionally, I'll tell you which sections you have not actually gone in and customized, but assuming we've gone through that process together, we can then click on that yes button and it will export it so that I can save it to my local hard drive. So I have a local copy of the policy. Additionally, it's going to be an important step for the next kind of feature of the platform. Before moving on, for anyone who's kind of joining in and maybe previously purchased Policy Pro and worked on it prior to our update to version 2 of CMMC, you'll see these two legacy buttons, Legacy CMMC and Legacy NIST. That's where your data will reside if you worked previously on either of those versions. You can continue working there or migrate your information over to CMMC 2.0. Moving on to policy assessment. So this is really the second step of the process of creating policies, which is ensuring that either policies created using our policy building tool, or maybe you already have an existing policy, let's say an access control policy created. You do not have to go ahead and create a policy from scratch using our policy templates. You can simply upload any existing policy here into our assessment tool and analyze it to ensure that it's covering everything it needs to cover. So we'll go ahead and upload a document here together. And you can see the only requirements is that it's in these accepted formats, doc, docx, and PDF. So if you do already have an existing policy, definitely check out the assessment tool as well to ensure that everything has been covered with the updates to CMMC version 2. Once you've uploaded it, you're going to then want to click on the detailed scorecard to view missing key phrases in order to get an in-depth view of how your policy is done and how your policy is scored. So we'll go ahead and click this, and we can see that the policy I've uploaded in terms of the overall assessment, it appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. The overall assessment is comprised of 3 different metrics. We've got the relevance, which is how many key terms or phrases are included in your policy. The higher that is, the higher the relevance is going to be, and therefore the overall assessment. The model similarity is comparing the policy you've uploaded to our model document. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, again, to ensure that it's been appropriately customized. So as I was talking about, if you did utilize our template, you want to make sure that it fits your organization and what your organization has implemented. Additionally, we're checking to ensure that you're covering everything it needs to cover. And then finally, the word count. It's either going to be adequately long enough or it's going to say it's too short. In the case, if it says it's too short on the word count, all that would mean in terms of your scoring and your assessment is that it might not nearly be as accurate because we do need some context surrounding those various terms in order to accurately assess your policy. So if you do have that too short word count, you can either increase the length or just understand that some of the other metrics I mentioned earlier might be a little bit less accurate. In terms of the overall score, it is not like an academic score or what many people are used to when they're taking a look at their scores, meaning 90% is an A, 80% is a B. It actually works like a threshold-based question, so anything above a 50% for the overall score is a relevant policy. And we'll talk a little bit further on in the demo about how you can utilize the overall score in conjunction with some of the other features of the platform. So all of that is kind of like the high-level overview and metrics of how my policy is done. But what I'm sure is probably most interesting to folks and what is most useful is our KENI, or key elements not included. These are all of the terms and phrases that are missing in my policies that I should be looking to include. And we break that out into 2 different types of KENIs. We've got the control KENIs and the general KENIs. The control KENIs, again, are those key terms or phrases that are missing in my policy, and they're actually tied to a specific control directly from the standard. Again, today's standard we're talking about is for CMMC version 2, level 2. So CUI non-public information is my first control KENI here. And we can see that it's tied to access control 3.1.22, which is about controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. Underneath that, we provide you the discussion. So the discussion and the security requirement come directly from the standard itself. That way you don't have to kind of flip back and forth trying to figure out exactly what 3.1.22 is about. Additionally, the documents for examination are going to be other sorts of documents, records, materials that your organization might already have created that can help you address that particular control KENI. Some examples of those documents can include your security plan, list of users authorized to post publicly accessible content, security awareness training records, again, any sort of other documents or record that can help address that KENI. Certain control KENIs, for example, FIPS here, are tied to multiple controls. So in the case of FIPS, it's tied to 3.1.13. as well as 3.1.17. So in the case where it's tied to multiple controls like this, you want to make sure that you're addressing it in each control that it's referenced under. Now, the general policy KENI terms are very similar in the sense that they're also key terms and phrases. However, you will not see this collapse all, expand all button next to it with that additional information. And the reason for that is these general policy Kenny terms are not specific to a particular control. Some of them are generic to just the access control policy as a whole. And you can utilize this as you're recrafting and reworking your policies in order to address everything an access control policy should address, whether it's in terms of your narrative, whether it's just thinking about these terms as you're rebuilding it based on the control Kennys. If you do want to work on any of this information offline, you can also export these results into a PDF as well. One last feature in the policy assessment area is this management approval button. So I'll go ahead and click this here, and we can talk about how you can utilize it in our dashboard. So the dashboard is where you'll come to see all of your progress and journey throughout the platform. So whether you are creating policies in Policy Builder or uploading policies in Policy Assessment, you'll see all of that work here reflected in the dashboard. And if I scroll down, we can see our latest policy here, the one that's in the green Management Approved button. That is my latest version and my most recently management approved policy. And that's important for a couple different reasons. One, you want to ensure that everyone in your organization is following the same set of policies and the latest policy version that's been approved. So you definitely don't want to make sure, or you definitely don't want any of your employees working on older versions that might not be covering everything it should be covering. Additionally, it is a requirement as of now that CMMC requires all policies to have been approved by senior management. So this is a good way to keep track of those policies as well and which ones have been management approved. As you can see on the dashboard, also you can see all of those different metrics I mentioned previously. And as you're working on revising and updating your policies based on those Kennys, you'll see these number of Kennys being reduced here, the 50 and 41, and getting them lower. And as you get those Kennys lower, you'll see your overall score trending upwards. So as long as your score is above a 50% and that your score is trending upwards based on reducing those Kennys, you're heading in the right direction for your policies. So that is kind of a high-level overview of how you can utilize Policy Pro in order to quickly get compliant with these various standards. Again, take a look at the free trial. It's a quick and easy way in order to improve your SPUR score. If at any time during this process you have any questions or you need some additional information, definitely take a look at our reference library as well. So our reference library is going to contain helpful links and tools and resources across the web based on whatever it is you're looking for additional information on. So whether you're updating your policies based on the assessment or maybe you just need some additional information as you're working on the policy templates, you can come here, for example, into access control. Maybe one of my control Kennys was related to firewalls or maybe mobile devices, and I'm unsure how to address that in my policy. I can select the appropriate link here and gain some additional information that way. So hopefully this has been a good overview. Again, this is definitely the first step into anyone's journey for compliance, and you want to make sure that you have those policies in place. Thanks for your time, and I'll turn it over back to Kevin.
Thanks, David. Let me share my desktop again. So Exostar's Policy Pro is just one of the elements of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. Along with Policy Pro, that's often in companionship with Exostar's Certification Assistant. Certification Assistant is that, once again, software as a service application that walks you through those 110 controls of NIST 800-171 It allows you to determine and to put together both the policies that you create in Policy Pro as well as the implementation statements of how you've implemented that particular policy, the proof that you've implemented that policy, the logs or the access lists, et cetera, that you typically need to prove to the folks that a policy has been implemented, and also provides the reminders and things like that about these things need to be reviewed periodically, things need to be updated periodically, et cetera. So you can use Certification Assistant to walk you through that. The output of Certification Assistant is that SPRS score, the system security plan, and any open POAMs you have. This Policy Pro and Certification Assistant, if in one of those areas you find that you need a better way to store and process that controlled unclassified information that you may be receiving, you can take advantage of Exostar's managed Microsoft 365 for CMMC solution. This provides an enclave up in Microsoft's Azure high environment to store and process that controlled unclassified information. So you can provide users both from your organization as well as third parties and partners access to and a place to work on that information, and keep that footprint as small as possible of the systems and users that interact with that information. If you want to engage with a third party to do either a readiness assessment of where you stand today, if you've done your self-assessment and you just want verification that you've done things correctly, or if you want a more detailed assessment, Exostar does have a number of partners available, and these are available either from Exostar's website or from directly within our apps themselves. You can engage with these partners and ask them to work with you as a services organization to help you either review what you've done or to get assistance in gaps you may have identified. So all of these things consist of Exostar's CMMC Ready Suite, and there are bundled pricing options available for all these things. So as we move to question and answer, I just want to remind everybody that there is an exit poll. We would appreciate you filling that out. It gives us great feedback on how we did today, but also allows you to let us know some additional topics you may want to see in future sessions. Now, to get to the question and answers. So as I mentioned, we received five questions about the webinar today. So one I got was, how do I become a resource service partner to partnered companies in the Australian region? So if you want to become one of Exostar's solution or services partners, there is a request form on the website. You can fill that out and send that to us. You can also obviously reach out to myself at kevin.hancock@exostar.com. Happy to get you in touch with our partner managers and start those discussions. So number two, as a subcontractor on the mini level and maybe close to micro, we are not even considered a medium risk. How hard is it to get a not applicable waiver from the DoD, since none of our network containing CUI is accessible from the internet? So this does bring up, so when you're doing your NIST 800-171 self-assessment, you're given, you can either choose implemented, not implemented, or not applicable to those 110 controls. Now, you have to be careful with the not applicable label, because only a few of those can be, if you will, really self-selected by the individual filling out the assessment. So for example, because one of the NIST 800-171 controls is about wireless networks. If you don't have a wireless network, you can choose not applicable without getting that DoD waiver. However, that's one of the few controls that you can do that without getting that waiver from the DoD. So to tell you the truth, I don't know how tough it is to get a waiver from the DoD about not applicable for a certain control. What I would suggest you do is talk with your contracting officer, explain your situation, let them know, the size of your organization and how you control that information today, and then work that out with them. Now, you may still have to fill out a NIST 800-171 self-assessment, right? That's still one of the requirements, but they'd be able to better give you an idea of what it would take to get those waivers. So number 3, is end of 2024 still a deadline for CMMC to unite with the NIST 800-171 controls? As I covered in the intro section, we don't really have a date yet. We know it's not going to be 2023 just based on the timeline of when the rule will be submitted to the General Services Administration. It'll then come back for a public comment period and the time it would take to get through that. But but I don't really know if end of 2024, spring of 2024, et cetera, would be when you'll start to see it. So I would say, stay tuned. Keep up to date on all those various places you're probably getting this information today, including our webinars. We always give an update of kind of where we're at as part of these sessions. So I don't really have a firm date on when CMMC will start to show up in the DFARS contracts, or in contracts with DFARS clauses, I should say. We got the question about what is NIST, or what is CMMC 2.0 and NIST 800-171. So these are related, very closely related requirements that the Department of Defense requires of contractors who receive and or work with controlled unclassified information. NIST 800-171 is a standard, right? NIST stands for National Institute for Standards. And testing. They're the ones who put together the controls that need to be wrapped around controlled unclassified information. So DoD says in order to work with controlled unclassified information, these are the controls you must have in place. And they refer to NIST 800-171 as those controls. As I mentioned before, CMMC 2.0 is a further rule or requirement from the Department of Defense that is currently in the rulemaking stage, which will still require compliance with NIST 800-171, but will expand that to require that third-party assessment if you want to be able to work with controlled unclassified information. And then we often get the question of how do Policy Pro and Certification Assistant work together? So as you saw in David's presentation, Policy Pro is where you write, work on, grade those policies across those 14 control families that implement those 110 controls. Right, so Policy Pro is kind of that first step. Okay, here are the policies I need to have in place over these control families and the individual controls therein. You can then, either export those policies as the documents themselves, or link those policies into Certification Assistant, because as you go through the checklist, if you will, right, of the 110 controls, you've got to provide your written policies, right? And that can be in Certification Assistant. You could then link that to what you've got in Policy Pro, right? Here is my control over, to my access control policy. Then in Certification Assistant, you then put in your implementation statements. This is how I've implemented these particular policies. You then also in Certification Assistant link in the proof that you've actually implemented those controls. So you've got the policies for access control. You've got the implementation as statements for those different groups of users in my system. You've then got links to the the actual lists themselves that say, hey, here are the users and the roles they have, and here's how I've, and here's a screenshot, if you will, of that. And then you've got that sign off. So they work together to provide that end-to-end traceability from policy all the way through how you've implemented it. So when an assessor or you're doing your self-assessment, a user can quickly map and trace those things back and forth. So these can either be used as a standalone application, they can be linked together to provide that end-to-end visibility and that end-to-end life cycle, if you will, of those policies and procedures you have in place. There is a bundle price around these, so you can, when you go to sign up, choose the bundle rather than just a single application. That you can find in the web store itself. And then obviously Exostar would work with you around additional information, et cetera, that you might need for those other solutions as well. So that kind of covers the questions we received for this particular session. If you are interested in upcoming events or you want to get additional information, we do have another webinar about Certification Assistant itself next Wednesday on July 19th. That will be walking through how you conduct a self-assessment via Certification Assistant. If you just need to learn more about CUI or CMMC, DoD procurement policies, etc., we've got some links here as well. As David mentioned, Policy Pro has a free trial. You can sign up for that on our website. Certification Assistant also has a free trial, so feel free to sign up for those free trials as well. And again, just a reminder, please fill out that exit poll. It helps us greatly to see how we're doing and also to get additional information you may need. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you do need some additional information, you can reach out to us at the mail address you see there, cmmc-pp@exostar.com. You can also reach out to us at our website, www.exostar.com. As I mentioned, there's a chat feature on all those pages. Be happy to answer your questions or get back in touch with you as needed as well. So thanks again for your time today. David, thanks so much for your participation today. Everyone, I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll hopefully be talking to you soon.